Good day, students, and welcome to our lesson number 3. And for today's lesson, we're going to talk about what we call literary genres. For the following lesson, we have the following objectives. At the end of the lesson, you have to compare and contrast the various 21st century literary genres and the ones from the earlier genres period, citing their elements, structure, and tradition. Next is that you have to produce a creative representation of a literary text by applying multimedia and ICT skills. So those are the objectives that we have for this particular lesson. So at this juncture, let's begin our lesson number 3. Again, for our lesson number 3, we're going to talk about the literary genres of pre-colonial period, the colonial period, and the 21st century period. Okay. So for today's lesson, we're going to talk about the literary genres that exist in pre-colonial period, to the colonial period, and the post-colonial period, or the what we call 21st century period. So what do we really mean by the what we call literary genres? It is said, class, that genre means that it is a type of art, literature, or music characterized by a specific form, content, and style. So meaning to say, genre is our way to categorize art, to categorize literature, or even the music. Okay? So it is a category of literary composition. So genres may be determined by literary techniques, tone, content, or even the case of fiction or stories in terms of their length. Meaning to say that we can categorize a specific work of literature or by considering its techniques or the techniques that have been used, the tone also, the content, or in the case of short stories, the length. Okay? So that's how we use what we call literary genres. Okay, so what are the literary genres in the Philippines? It is said, class, that the multiplicity of Philippine literature progress alongside its history. Meaning to say that the variety of Philippine literature is actually goes side by side to its history or the Philippine history. Meaning to say, whatever happens in the history of the Philippines, that actually has an impact to the world of Philippine literature. Okay, its themes are rooted in the context of the Philippines' pre-colonial cultural traditions and the socio-political histories of its colonial contemporary ways. Meaning to say that it is good that's why it's good to consider the pre-colonial times, the colonial times, up until the 21st century time if we're going to deal with the what we call Philippine literature, because we believe that Philippine literature goes side by side the with the Philippine history. Okay, so let's begin with the what we call pre-colonial period. So at this juncture, let's have a quick recap of what do we really mean by pre-colonial period. So pre-colonial period pertains to the period that happens before colonial period. Okay, so it is said that in the pre-colonial period or the pre-colonial literature, Filipinos demonstrated rich lived experiences orally expressed in their folk speeches, songs, narratives, indigenous rituals, and mimetic dances. Meaning to say that in pre-colonial times or pre-colonial period, specifically with pre-colonial literature, the most notable thing or medium that has been used by most Filipinos are the what we call oral literature. Meaning to say that their short story or the literature has been passed by from one generation to another using the word of mouth. Okay? So what are the different literary genres that we have during the pre-colonial period? Okay, so number one, pre-colonial genre that we have is the what we call riddles. So riddles are mystifying statements, okay, or questions, praise, and rhyme to require ingenuity in determining its answer. So, meaning to say, riddles are actually mystifying elements or confusing statements that are actually requiring you as a reader to think about it. Okay? So, meaning to say, riddles in Tagalog are our bugtong. So, riddle is actually originated during the pre-colonial period, or it exists during the pre-colonial period. Okay? So, riddles for Visayas are called tigmo. However, for Tagalog, it is called bugtong. Okay, so that's the first um, literary genre that we have during the period. So what's the next type of Philippine genre that we have during the pre-colonial period? So we also have proverbs. So proverbs in Tagalog, we call them sawikain or salawikain. And however, if you are Ilocano, you call this sarsarita rather. So, what is proverbs? So, proverbs are wise saying that prescribes codes of behavior, mirror societal norms, traditions, beliefs, and impart lessons in brief rhyming verses. So, meaning to say that proverbs are ideally must be in a form of poem. Okay, poem. That proverbs are meant to give us proper behavior, to give us or to mirror the societal norm that we have to follow and the likes. So some examples that we have are statements that you usually heard to your parents. Like for example, ang hindi lumingon sa pinanggalingan na hindi makakarating sa pinaroroonan. So this is in a poetic form. However, it teaches us some lessons in life. Okay, so in English, a person who does not remember where he or she came from will never reach his or her destination. Again, proverbs are poetic in a form or a structure and teaches us some moral lessons that we must have in our lives. Okay? Okay. So early Filipinos also have songs. Okay? So songs are forms of folk lyric speak volumes of the typical rural lives and reflect people's aspiration and lifestyle. Meaning to say that for early Filipinos, especially for those who live in pre-colonial period, in this period, songs are more than just a song. Instead, it's an expression of themselves, it's an expression that reflects their aspiration and their way of living or the what we call lifestyle. Okay, so people that live or Filipinos that live in pre-colonial period uses gongs and bells to or any other historical instruments, okay, to maintain their um, rhythm, okay, in their songs. So, songs as a genre for pre-colonial period has three types. And number one is what we call folk songs. So, folk song, the Filipino term for this is awit ng bayan or awiting bayan. So, these are songs with lines often described as repetitive, meaning to say that there are words that are repeated for each verses. Okay? Also didactic, meaning to say that some words or folk songs are naturally saying something that you can learn from. Okay, next and last category of folk song is that it is sonorous, meaning to say that it will actually help us enjoy the music that when you're going to hear this one. So one particular example that we know that is categorized as a folk song is the song Magtanim Ay Bibiro, right? Okay, so the next type of song or the subgroup of song is the what we call lalabay or uyayi. So these are soothing songs often sung usually by mothers to put babies to sleep. So that's what we call lalabay or uyayi. And the last one is the what we call serenade, or that Filipino term is the what we call harana. So these are courtship songs used by young men to capture the heart of the girl they love. Okay, so all of these three are subgroups of the genre which is songs. That all of this are actually originated and first used during the pre-colonial period. Pre-colonial period is the what we call chants or bulong. So chants or bulong are used to give respect, excuse, or apology to unseen or other elemental spirits our ancestors believed in to deliver them from danger or harm. So moreover, these are utilized in enchantments and even in witchcraft. So chants or bulong are actually, personally, I believe that we unconsciously do this. Like for example, if in my case, if I'm on forestial area, like if I'm going to cross a tall and big tree, an old tree, diba, we tend to say, tabi-tabi po, parang ganun. So, that's one way or one typical example of chants or bulong. However, early Filipinos are actually doing chants and bulong in a poetic way. So meaning to say that it is also in a form of poem pa rin. Okay? So one thing to highlight here is that our ancestors or early Filipinos are actually believing in elements or spiritual elements that are living in some areas of the Philippines. Specifically, it's in forest, right? The next two chants are the what we call epics or epico in Tagalog. So these are long narratives accounts of heroic exploits. So meaning to say that epics and epico deal with people who are actually showing heroic acts class that shows extraordinary courage and bravery. So one particular example that we have here in the Philippines is the story or the epic poem of Biyag ni Lamang or the Life of Lamang from Ilocos region. So this has been originated in Ilocos. Moreover, it is notable for being the first Philippine folk epic to be recorded in written form. Okay, so because all of the works or literary works that are in a form of oral literature, it is believed that this epic poem or poetic epic has been the first epic that was in a written form. Okay? Under pre-colonial period is the what we call myths or mythology. Okay, so we also have if we have Greek mythology, so Philippines has also its own um, mythology or myths. So these are symbolic narratives, usually of unknown origin and at least partly traditional that ostensibly relate actual events and essentially associated with religious beliefs. So myths are naturally associated to religious beliefs. So some myth characters that we have are Bathala, so Mayari, Hanan, yan, Dumangan. So these are some of the characters that we have in our Filipino myths. Also, we have the what we call legends. So these are stories that explains the origins of things and phenomena in the surroundings of the world. So legends are like, for example, legend of um, Mount Pinatubo. Meaning to say, legends are kwentong bayan that it is a narrative or usually in a form of short story which explain the origin of mountains, the origin of fruits, and the likes. So also we have fables, okay, or pabula. So these are brief stories for the children of native Filipinos. So this talk about supernatural or extraordinary people and usually follow in the form of narration that demonstrate a useful truth. These stories use animals as characters to represent a particular attribute of characteristics. So in pre-colonial period, early Filipinos also have fables wherein they use animals to serve as the character for their literary piece. Okay? So that's the pre-colonial period or the genres that exist in pre-colonial period. With the pre-colonial period and what are the genres that we have during that period. So let's jump to the second period period, which is the colonial period. And colonial period has been divided, of course, into three uh, colonizers that we had. So first is the Spanish or Spaniards. So we also have American period, and the last one is the Japanese period. Okay, so let's begin with the Spanish period. It is said, Glass, that Spanish colonizers ruled the Philippines, the country, for over 300 years, if I'm not mistaken, from 1565 to 1893. Exactly 333 years we are ruled by the Spaniards. So they used the cross to influence and impose their religion upon natives. So one most notable event or changes that happened in our history is the, kumbaga, it's more of religious matter eh. So they use the cross to influence us in a religious way. Okay, so cross that will symbolize Christianity, specifically Catholicism, right? Okay, so this has immensely influenced our literature because of the Spaniards. It immensely, or it greatly affects our literature. So in a way that a shift of interest from writing about nature to writing about the Christian faith. So before pre-colonial period, actually, usually the focus is of writing is about nature, diba? About nature. However, when they arrive in the Philippines, it's more of Christian faith. Literature has been, the genre of literature is more of Christian faith, or hymns, in the form of hymns, saints, miracles, and teaching of church took place. Okay? So during the period of the Spaniards or Spanish period, notable event that happened in literature is the shift of writing from nature, the focus of nature, up to Christian faith. Okay? Next, we all in the Spanish period we have three categories. Okay, number one, or three genres. Number one is religious matters. So meaning to say, um, so religious matters were in the form of prose, as prayer books, novenas, biographies of saints, and the like. So one most notable type of religious matter that we have is the what we call cenaculo. So it is a Filipino dramatization of life and times of Jesus Christ presented during the Lent. Usually this happens with Catholics. So it's part of their of uh, our religious activities. Usually this has been celebrated during Lent. Okay, in March. Okay. Next, we also have Passion. So this is still under religious matters. So Passion is a Philippine epic narrative of the life of Jesus Christ. It was written in stanzas with 5 lines of 8 syllables each and focus on his passion, death, and resurrection. So Passion is in a form of book or epic narrative. So in Tagalog, ito yung nakikita natin or ito yung naririnig natin whenever we are in a season of Lent. Yung may mga kumakanta sa simbahan, yung mga ayun, may mga kumakanta sa simbahan, usually mga elderly. Okay, so that's classified as a literature as well. Of literature during Spanish period is the what we call secular or non-religious literature, meaning to say that this is a literary these are literary pieces that are non-religious by nature. Okay, so one most notable example that we have under this category is the zarzuela. So this is a type of drama that originated in basically in Spain, because this has been brought to us by Spanish, okay, by Spaniards. So it includes singing, dancing on stage with lyric alternatively, spoken and sung in operatic and popular styles. And actually, up until the modern era or age, zarzuela is still being practiced by most of the Filipinos. Last one is the literary literature that is revolutionary by nature, or we call them revolutionary literature. So loomed with exposes that spark revolutions and resistance among the Filipinos. So these are literary pieces that are revolutionary by nature. Okay, so its themes and focus are talking about or dealing about Revolutionary Act. So some few examples that we have are Andres Bonifacio's Obligations of Our Countrymen, also Apolinario Mabing's essay entitled El Desarrollo y Caída de la República Filipina. So both of these literary pieces are actually categorized as revolutionary literature. So that those are some of the genres or the changes that happen in literature um, of the Philippines during Spanish period. Okay, now let's move on to the American period. So what are the notable events that happened during this period? How does it affect our system? And how does it affect the Philippine literature that we have? Okay, first one is that the Philippines had a great leap in education and culture during the American colonization. Meaning to say, it is believed, class, that during the American colonization, their focus is to promote education as well as culture. Okay? Because public school system is actually introduced and the usage of both English and Filipino languages are being practiced. So during the American colonization, this is when education education started. Okay? And it is believed, class, that Filipinos ages 7 above are actually required to attend schooling. Um, Likewise, in this period, English language and Filipino languages are being used by Filipinos. Okay. Moreover, we have the what we call Thomasites class. So during this period, Thomasites emerge. Who are the Thomasites? Thomasites are the it is believed that the Thomasites are the first teachers that we have here in the Philippines. So who are the Thomasites? These are the 600 American teachers who traveled from the United States to the newly occupied territory of the Philippines on the transport ship USS Thomas. Okay, so historically they are acknowledged as the first teacher here in the Philippines, the Thomasites, the 600 American teachers that traveled using the American ship USS Thomas. Moreover, what are the some or a thing that happens or change in our literary perspective during this period. So the literature during the American period was imitative of the form of American writing. So during this period, Philippine literature is actually some sort of an imitation of American writing in such a way that American writing promotes free writing. So therefore, no structure, no rules. So Filipinos learn how to adopt such ways of writing literary pieces. Okay? For the colonial period is the period of Japanese or the Japanese period in the Republic. So in the Philippine literature came to a halt during the Japanese period, meaning to say that during the Japanese period, class, Philippine literature totally stopped. Okay, so the English language was banned at the Filipino and the Filipino language was mandated under Japanese rule. So those are some of the events that happened during the Japanese period. Moreover, writing during this period reign were journalistic in nature or in a way nagbabalita. Okay, yung nature of the writings during this period. Thus, essays were composed to glorify Filipinos, to glorify the spirit of Filipinos, and to figuratively attack the Japanese. So there are underlying agendas. Okay, Filipinos wrote essays and literary pieces for them to figuratively, okay, attack the Japanese or Japanese colonizers. Okay, so that's all for the colonial period. Last period, which is the 21st century period. So what do we mean by 21st century period and what are the literary pieces and how are we going to classify literary pieces that are under 21st century literature. Okay, it is said, Glass, that it is all literary works written and published at the later part of 21st century, meaning from 2001 and onwards. So meaning to say, any literary pieces that are written from 2001, year 2001 up until the present are considered as 21st century literature. Okay, so what are the genres that we have here in the 21st century? Number one and the most common is drama. Okay, so it is a genre of literature with stories composed of prose, which is meant to be dramatically and theatrically performed. Drama is must be requires a lot of skills, right? So it must be dramatically and theatrically performed by numerous participants. Okay. Also, we have in 21st century we also have what we call creative nonfiction. So it is a genre of writing that uses literary styles and techniques to create factually accurate narratives. Once we say nonfiction class, nonfiction stories are stories that are based from real life scenarios or factual scenarios. However, in this case, it's going to be a creative nonfiction. So we have the genre which is creative nonfiction in a way that you as a writer of 21st century, you have to make your nonfiction as a creative one. Adapt that one. Okay, it's a genre of writing that uses different literary styles and techniques. We give importance to the techniques and styles that the author will be using so that this nonfiction will be creatively done. Okay. Next, we also have blogs. Okay, 21st century is actually interconnected to technology. Therefore, we use the power of internet and technology. That's why we consider blog as a 21st century genre. So it is a log containing short articles called posts that can be changed regularly. So you know this one. Okay. Also, for 21st century, we also have spoken word poetry. I know you're familiar with this one. It is a poem that has made its way into the hearts and souls of thousands of Filipinos, especially the millennials. Spoken word poetry is in a form of poem or a poem that meant to be spoken or meant to be delivered. Okay, delivered. Okay. Next is fiction. So fiction has genres that can be defined as narrative literary works whose content is produced by the imagination. So in contrary to nonfiction stories are based on factual. However, if it's going to be fiction, it is a work of imagination of the author, the 21st century author. Okay, in fiction, something is feigned, invented, and imagined, a made-up story. So that fiction is also classified as a 21st century genre. Also, in 21st century, we also have the genre which is we call chick lit. So chick lit is a genre which addresses issues of modern womanhood. So often humorously and light-heartedly. So chick lit is a form of writing of a literary piece which focuses on womanhood and how modern society addresses concerns in line with women. Okay, so the genre became popular in the late 1990s. Literature that appeals especially to women. Okay, is usually having romantic and sentimental thing. So chick lit focuses on significance of women in our society. This is also one of the genres that we have in 21st century. Also, and the last one is the graphic novel. Okay, so graphic novel is a narrative work in which the story is conveyed to the reader using a comic form. Okay, so we're going to, in graphic novels, this is a type of a novel or a long story or series of story. However, it is in a form of graphics. We are using comic form. We are using illustration to represent the story. Okay, to add up spice on the story. Okay, so that's the 21st century genres that we have. And thank you for listening.